Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. Nathan Cooper's corner office, painting golden streaks across the architectural drawings scattered on his desk. His eyes, however, were fixed on the silver-framed photograph that had become both a comfort and a torment over the past few months. In the photo, his wife Veronica's auburn hair caught the sunlight, her green eyes sparkling as she helped their daughter Grace blow out the candles on an elaborate butterfly-shaped cake. Their son Daniel's face was smeared with blue frosting, his gap-toothed grin capturing the pure joy of the moment. 3 years had passed since that perfect summer afternoon, but Nathan could still smell the vanilla frosting and hear the chorus of off-key happy birthday singing. A shadow fell across the photograph, pulling Nathan from his reverie. His business partner, Dominic Walsh, stood before his desk, his usual confident demeanor tinged with concern. The sleeves of his white dress shirt were rolled up to his elbows, a telltale sign he'd been working on detailed renderings all afternoon. Earth to Nathan, Dominic waved his hand in front of Nathan's face, his gold wedding band catching the light. The Harrison Project deadline is tomorrow, and you've been staring at that photo for the past 15 minutes. Nathan blinked, trying to focus on the stack of blueprints before him. The lines blurred together, much like the boundaries in his marriage lately. He pressed his fingers against his temples, feeling the throb of an oncoming headache. Sorry, Dom. He trailed off, the weight of his suspicions making it hard to form words. Dominic perched on the edge of the desk, his movement causing several pencils to roll onto the floor. He didn't bother picking them up. Instead, he studied Nathan's face with the same attention to detail he usually reserved for examining structural problems in their designs. Something feels off at home, doesn't it? The question hung in the air like smoke, making it harder for Nathan to breathe. He loosened his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed recently. Am I that obvious? Only to someone who's known you since college, Dominic replied, his voice softening. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. Veronica's still spending all that time with the youth counselor? Nathan's jaw clenched involuntarily at the mention. Jason Reynolds. The name tasted bitter on his tongue. Her supposed childhood friend, who conveniently moved here 6 months ago. She's at his youth center 4 nights a week now. Sometimes 5. He picked up a pencil and began tapping it against the desk rhythmically. Says he's like a brother to her. Dominic snorted, the sound sharp with disbelief. Brothers don't look at sisters the way I saw him looking at her at the firm's Christmas party. The pencil in Nathan's hand snapped. The sound made both men jump, and Nathan stared at the broken pieces as if they held some hidden meaning. The memory of that night flooded back. The way Jason's hand had lingered on Veronica's lower back as they danced, how their heads had bent close together during conversations, their shared laughter that seemed to exclude everyone else in the room. I thought I was being paranoid, Nathan admitted, sweeping the broken pencil into his trash bin. Told myself I was seeing things that weren't there. What changed? Dominic pulled up a chair, settling in for what he sensed would be a longer conversation. The Harrison Project could wait a few more minutes. Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, noticing absently that he needed a haircut. Everything. Nothing. He gestured vaguely. The late nights at the youth center, for one. She used to call if she was running late. Now she just sends a text, usually after she's already supposed to be home. Could be legitimate youth center business, Dominic offered, playing devil's advocate despite his own misgivings. Along with the sudden password changes on her phone and laptop, Nathan countered. The way she turns her phone face down whenever I'm nearby. The hushed conversations that stop the moment I enter a room. He picked up the photograph, studying Veronica's smiling face, as if it might reveal some hidden truth. Last week, I came home early and overheard her on the phone in our bedroom. She was laughing. That real laugh, you know? The one that comes from deep in her chest. I hadn't heard that laugh in months, Dom. Not directed at me. Anyway, Dominic leaned forward, his expression grave. What did she say when you walked in? She hung up immediately. Said it was her sister Kate. Nathan set the photo down with deliberate care. Kate was at my mother's house at the time, helping her with her garden. I know because I just gotten off the phone with Mom. Did you confront her? What would be the point? Nathan stood up abruptly, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, a maze of buildings and streets he'd helped design over the years. Everything in its proper place, following careful plans and specifications. Unlike his personal life, which felt like a structure whose foundation was slowly cracking. She'd just have another explanation, another excuse, another lie. Dominic was quiet for a moment, watching his friend's reflection in the window. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Have you considered hiring someone? To be sure. Nathan turned, his expression pained. You mean a private investigator? Jesus, Dom. Is that what we've come to? Better than driving yourself crazy with suspicions, Dominic pointed out. He stood up, straightening his tie. Remember Rachel Martinez? The PI we hired for those corporate background checks last year. The one who found out the Turner Group was cooking their books. She's discreet, professional. Dominic pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it on Nathan's desk. And she owes me a favor. Just think about it. Nathan stared at the card, but made no move to pick it up. I never thought I'd be this person, Dom. The suspicious husband, checking phone records, considering hiring a PI. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. We were perfect on paper, you know? The successful architect and the devoted community volunteer. 2 beautiful kids, house in the suburbs, family vacations to Disney World. Perfect on paper doesn't mean perfect in reality, Dominic said quietly. And paper. He picked up one of their architectural drawings, holding it up to the light. Paper can hide a lot of flaws until you look closer. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah, their receptionist, poked her head in. Mr. Cooper? Your wife is on line 1. Says she'll be late tonight. Emergency meeting at the youth center. Nathan and Dominic exchanged looks. Without breaking eye contact, Nathan reached for Rachel Martinez's business card and slipped it into his pocket. Tell her I got the message, Sarah. Thank you. After Sarah left, Dominic gathered up the Harrison Project blueprints. Emergency meeting at the youth center? 3rd one this week, Nathan replied, his voice flat. You know what you need to do? Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of the business card in his pocket like a stone. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I do. As Dominic left his office, Nathan turned back to the photograph on his desk. The happy family moment captured there seemed to mock him now, like a beautiful architectural rendering of a building that would never actually be built. He opened his drawer and placed the photo face down inside. It was time to stop staring at pretty pictures and start looking for the truth beneath them. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Nathan pushed open the heavy glass door of the Daily Grind, his favorite coffee shop. The familiar scent of freshly ground beans and warm pastries usually brought him comfort. But today his mind was too preoccupied to notice. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at Rachel Martinez's business card and listening to Veronica's steady breathing beside him, wondering how many secrets that breath carried. Lost in thought, he nearly collided with someone coming out of the shop. Coffee sloshed over the rim of his cup, spattering his crisp white shirt. Oh God, I'm so sorry, a familiar voice exclaimed. Nathan? Nathan Cooper? Looking up from his attempt to dab at his shirt with a napkin, Nathan found himself face to face with Rachel Martinez herself. The private investigator looked different in daylight than she had during their corporate investigations. Less formal in jeans and a leather jacket, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe bun. But her eyes were just as sharp, missing nothing. Rachel, he managed, trying to hide his surprise. What are the odds? She smiled, but there was something tight about it. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. Really glad. Her eyes darted around the coffee shop. Do you have a minute? There's something you should know. Nathan's stomach clenched. The way she said it. There was something in her tone that made him certain this wasn't about spilled coffee or coincidental meetings. Let me buy you a fresh cup, Rachel offered, already turning back toward the counter. Least I can do for ruining your shirt. Plus, she lowered her voice. I owe you one, remember? For helping my sister with her house plans? 5 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth far from the morning rush of customers. Nathan's fresh coffee sat untouched before him, steam rising in lazy spirals. Rachel kept glancing at her phone as if gathering courage. I wasn't sure whether to tell you this, she began, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. It's not really my place, And I wasn't following them, I swear. I was working another case. Them? Nathan's voice sounded strange to his own ears. Rachel met his eyes directly. Your wife. And a man I've seen her with. Tall, dark hair, athletic build. She paused. Drives a silver Tesla Model 3? The description hit Nathan like a physical blow. Jason Reynolds. That's the name on the motel registration, yes? The world seemed to tilt sideways. Nathan gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Motel. Rachel reached in her messenger bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Her movements were careful, precise, as if she were handling evidence at a crime scene. In a way, Nathan supposed she was Sunset Valley Motel, she said quietly, sliding the envelope across the table. On the outskirts of town. I was there conducting surveillance for another case, insurance fraud thing. But over the past month, I've seen them there multiple times. Nathan stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Multiple times? Rachel nodded, pulling out her phone. I documented everything. Force of habit in my line of work. I have dates, times. She scrolled through her gallery. The first time was 3 weeks ago, Tuesday afternoon. Then again that Friday. Last week, they were there Monday and Thursday. Each date corresponded with one of Veronica's emergency meetings at the youth center. Nathan felt bile rise in his throat. The photos are in the envelope, Rachel said gently, along with copies of the motel registration. They weren't exactly subtle about it. Same room each time, always paid with his credit card. Nathan finally reached for the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. The photos inside were clear, clinical date and time stamps in the corner, capturing moments that would forever change his life. Veronica and Jason entering the motel. Leaving hours later, her hair slightly mussed, his tie loosened. In one photo, they were kissing against his car, seemingly oblivious to the world around them. I'm so sorry, Nathan. Rachel's voice seemed to come from far away. I debated telling you, but if it were me, I want to know. Something about her tone made Nathan look up sharply. There's more, isn't there? Rachel hesitated, then nodded slowly. The timing, when did Jason really come into your lives? 6 months ago, Nathan replied automatically. When he moved here. But Veronica said they grew up together in. He moved here 8 years ago. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Nathan's mind raced, calculating dates, remembering. I have proof, Rachel continued, pulling more documents from her bag. Property records, business licenses for his youth counseling practice, newspaper articles about his arrival in town. All from 8 years ago. 8 years ago, when Daniel was conceived. The realization hit Nathan with such force that he actually gasped, earning concerned looks from nearby customers. His son's face flashed in his mind. The shape of his eyes, the curve of his smile, features that had always seemed somehow foreign to Nathan's own. Nathan? Rachel's voice was gentle. Do you want me to call someone? Dominic, maybe. He shook his head, struggling to form words. I need to hire you. Officially. Are you sure? Sometimes it's better not to. I need to know everything. Nathan cut her off, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. Every detail, every lie, every moment of the past 8 years that's been hidden from me. I need proof. Documentation. Anything that will hold up in court. Rachel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but Nathan, there's something else you should know. About Jason's pattern of behavior. What do you mean? In my line of work, you develop instincts. Things start to feel familiar. She pulled out her laptop, typing quickly. While I was investigating your wife and Jason, some things caught my attention. The way they interact in public, the careful maintenance of their cover story. It felt practiced, like he'd done this before. Nathan watched as she pulled up several news articles from different cities. What am I looking at? Jason's employment history. He moves every few years, always setting up youth counseling practices, always working closely with married women in the community. And always, she paused, choosing her words carefully, always leaving abruptly when questions start being asked. The implications made Nathan's head spin. You think Daniel isn't? I think we need to be thorough, Rachel said firmly. If you want to hire me officially, I'll look into everything. But Nathan, She reached across the table, touching his hand lightly. Whatever we find, whatever the truth is, you need to be prepared for it. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Nathan looked at the photos again, at the evidence of his wife's betrayal spread out before him, like pieces of a puzzle he'd been too blind to see. Then he thought of Daniel's smile, of Grace's innocent trust, of the life he'd built on what might be a foundation of lies. I'm sure, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. How soon can you start? The weight of the DNA test kit felt impossibly heavy in Nathan's jacket pocket as he pulled into his driveway that evening. The suburban street was quiet, porch lights casting warm glows across manicured lawns. His own house, a modernist design he'd created himself, stood dark except for the soft blue flicker of the TV through the living room windows. He sat in his car for a moment, gathering his courage. Rachel's revelations from that morning still echoed in his mind, along with the conversation they'd had after he officially hired her. Document everything, she'd advised. Keep a journal of dates, times, suspicious behavior. Save texts, emails, phone records. And Nathan, her expression had been deadly serious. Don't confront them yet. We need to build an airtight case first. The DNA test had been his idea. Rachel had given him a knowing look when he'd mentioned it, then recommended a discreet laboratory that specialized in paternity testing. They don't require the mother's consent, she'd explained. Just samples from you and the children. Now, as he walked up his own driveway, Nathan felt like an intruder in his life. The security light clicked on, illuminating the path to his front door. Through the window, he could see Daniel and Grace sprawled on the couch, already in their pajamas. His heart clenched at the sight of them. "Daddy's home," Grace called out as he entered, launching herself at him with her usual enthusiasm. He caught her, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo, trying to memorize every detail of this moment, before everything changed. Daniel looked up from his tablet, offering a smile that suddenly seemed heartbreakingly familiar. It was Jason's smile. How had he never seen it before? The same slight dimple in the left cheek, the same crinkle at the corners of the eyes. "Hey, Dad," Daniel said, scooting over to make room on the couch. "Want to see this cool science video I found? It's about architecture and nature, like how bees build their hives." Nathan's throat tightened. Even now, his son was trying to connect with him through his interests. "Maybe later, buddy. Where's your mom?" "Youth center," Grace answered, still clinging to his neck. She said there's an emergency meeting. Again, the 8-year-old rolled her eyes in a perfect imitation of preteen exasperation. "Jason probably needs help with his paperwork. Mom says he's terrible at organizing things." Nathan set Grace down carefully, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Is that so? Well, how about we have some ice cream while we wait for her? But first," he made a show of sniffing the air. "Did you two brush your teeth yet?" Both children groaned in unison. "Do we have to?" Daniel protested. "If we're having ice cream anyway." "Tell you what," Nathan said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "Go brush now, and I'll let you have extra sprinkles." As the kids thundered upstairs, Nathan pulled out his phone. A text from Veronica glowed on the screen. "Running late. Don't wait up. Youth Center crisis." His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to text back, to ask what kind of crisis required his wife's presence until late at night 4 times in 1 week. Instead, he typed, "Kids miss you. Drive safe." Her response came quickly. "Kiss them goodnight for me. Love you." The casual "love you" felt like another knife in his heart. Nathan deleted the message thread and opened his photos, scrolling back through years of family memories. He paused on a picture from Daniel's birth. Himself beaming proudly in hospital scrubs, holding his newborn son. He'd been so happy, so completely unaware. "Dad, we brushed." Grace's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Extra sprinkles now." Nathan quickly pocketed his phone. "Let me check those teeth first, young lady." The next hour passed in a blur of ice cream, sprinkles, and forced normalcy. Nathan listened to Grace's detailed description of her art project and Daniel's enthusiastic explanation of bee architecture, all while the DNA test kit burned a hole in his jacket pocket. Finally, after 2 bedtime stories and several glasses of water, both children were asleep. Nathan stood in the hallway between their rooms, gathering his courage. The house felt eerily quiet, magnifying every small sound. The hum of the heating system, the tick of the hallway clock, his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He entered Grace's room first. His daughter slept peacefully, her stuffed unicorn clutched tight against her chest. The moonlight streaming through her window cast a silver glow across her face, so much like Veronica's that it made his heart ache. With trembling hands, he removed the sealed swab from its sterile packaging. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he whispered, gently brushing the swab against the inside of her cheek. Grace stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Nathan quickly sealed the sample in its container, marking it with Grace's name and the date. Daniel's room was next. His son had kicked off his covers as usual, one leg dangling off the bed. Comic books and science magazines were scattered across his floor, along with the architectural sketching pad Nathan had given him for his birthday. The sight of it, evidence of their shared interests, made Nathan's eyes burn with unshed tears. As he approached Daniel's bed, his son mumbled something in his sleep and rolled over. Nathan froze, but Daniel's breathing remained deep and even. With even shakier hands than before, Nathan collected the second sample. Back in his home office, Nathan stared at the two sealed containers on his desk. Each one held the potential to shatter his world completely. He pulled out the mailing envelope the laboratory had provided, along with his own sample taken earlier that day. The lab had promised results within 3 weeks. 21 days of waiting, watching, pretending everything was normal while his wife continued her deceptions. Nathan picked up his phone again, opening his text conversation with Rachel. "Samples collected," he typed. "What's next?" Her response came immediately. "Keep documenting everything. I'm following more leads. Meeting tomorrow? Same coffee shop. 7 a.m. Nathan sealed the envelope containing the DNA samples, then locked it in his desk drawer. He couldn't mail it tonight. The lab had specific handling instructions that required sending it during business hours. Another night of waiting. His phone buzzed again. "Veronica, things running later than expected. Might crash at Kate's since it's closer." "Don't worry." Nathan's laugh was hollow in the empty house. Kate's apartment was in the opposite direction from the youth center, nearly an hour away. He pulled up the tracking app he'd installed on his car after Rachel's revelations. The little blue, showing his wife's location, was nowhere near either the youth center or her sister's place. Instead, it was in the parking lot of the Sunset Valley Motel. Nathan opened his laptop and created a new document. At the top, he typed, "Evidence log, day 1, and began recording everything. The text messages, the car's location, the times and dates." Rachel was right. They needed to build an airtight case. As he typed, another text came from Veronica. "Miss you. See you in the morning." Nathan added it to his log, noting the timestamp. Then he opened his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of scotch he kept for client meetings. Pouring himself 2 fingers, he settled in for another long night of documentation. The DNA sample sat in his locked drawer like a ticking time bomb, counting down the moments until his world would explode. But as Nathan sipped his scotch and continued his methodical recording, he felt an odd sense of calm settling over him. The truth, however painful, would be better than living with lies. He just had to be patient, be thorough, and above all, be smart about how he exposed it all. In the quiet of his home office, Nathan began plotting his next moves with the same careful precision he used when designing his buildings. Every detail would be considered, every angle examined, every weakness addressed. After all, he thought grimly, if his marriage was going to collapse, he was going to make damn sure it came down on his terms. The manila envelope sat heavy in Nathan's desk drawer, its contents threatening to shatter the carefully maintained facade of normalcy in the Cooper household. 3 weeks of waiting had crystallized into cold certainty. The DNA results confirmed what he'd suspected since that morning in the coffee shop with Rachel. Daniel wasn't his biological son. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Additional background check complete. Files ready when you need them. He typed back a single word, "Tonight." The pieces were in place. Nathan had spent the past week planning this evening with the same meticulous attention he gave his architectural projects. Every detail had been considered, every potential reaction anticipated. He'd even chosen the wine, a particularly good Cabernet that Veronica loved. The perfect accompaniment to the destruction of lies. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, followed by the familiar chaos of children returning from school. Nathan straightened his tie and headed downstairs, his face a mask of casual friendliness. "Daddy!" Grace bounded toward him, her backpack swinging wildly. "Is it true Jason's coming for dinner?" "Mom said we're having a special family dinner." Nathan caught his daughter's eye, noting how they mirrored Veronica's exactly. At least there was no question about Grace's parentage. "That's right, princess. Why don't you go wash up and start your homework? We want everything nice and organized for our guest." Veronica stood in the kitchen, unloading groceries with quick, nervous movements. She'd changed from her work clothes into a navy blue dress that Nathan recognized from their anniversary dinner last year. The sight of it made his jaw clench. "You're home early," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I thought you had the Henderson project review today." "Rescheduled." Nathan leaned against the counter, watching her arrange ingredients with suspicious precision. "Need any help with dinner?" "No, I've got it under control." Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a cutting board. "Are you sure about this? Having Jason over?" "You've been distant lately when I mention him." Nathan forced a smile. "He's like family, right? A brother to you? It's about time we had a proper family dinner." Something in his tone made Veronica's knife pause mid-chop. She looked up, studying his face, but Nathan had years of experience presenting polished facades to difficult clients. Whatever she was looking for, she wouldn't find it. "Right?" she said slowly. "Family." Daniel wandered into the kitchen, nose buried in a book about famous architects, a gift from Nathan last Christmas. The sight of him made Nathan's chest ache. DNA results or not, this was his son. 8 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and proud father moments couldn't be erased by a laboratory report. "Hey, sport," Nathan called out. "Looking forward to dinner?" Daniel glanced up, and Nathan saw it again. Jason's smile, Jason's eyes. How had he been so blind? "Yeah, Jason promised to tell me more about the youth center's new building project. He says they're using some really cool, sustainable materials." "Is that so?" Nathan's voice remained steady despite the bitter taste in his mouth. "Well, we'll have plenty of time to discuss architecture tonight." The doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock. Nathan opened it to find Jason Reynolds standing on his porch, bottle of wine in hand, wearing the easy smile of a man who thought he had everyone fooled. "Nathan!" Jason's handshake was firm, friendly. The handshake of a man who'd slept with his wife and fathered his son. "Thanks for having me over. I brought a little something thoughtful of you." Nathan accepted the wine, noting with grim amusement that it was the same vintage he'd already chosen for the evening. "Please come in. We're all excited to have you here." Jason moved through the house with familiar ease, greeting Veronica with a quick hug that lasted a fraction too long. Nathan watched them, cataloging every subtle gesture, every shared glance. Rachel's surveillance photos hadn't captured these small moments of intimacy. The way Veronica's hand lingered on Jason's arm, the slight lean of their bodies toward each other. "Uncle Jason!" Grace's voice carried down the stairs as she bounded toward their guest. Nathan saw Veronica flinch at the word uncle. Did she think about that night 8 years ago when she looked at Daniel? Did she see Jason in their son's face the way Nathan now did? Dinner began with a practiced normalcy that made Nathan's skin crawl. He'd seated himself at the head of the table, Veronica and Jason on either side, the children between them. The perfect family tableau, poisoned by lies. "You're like family," Nathan said, raising his glass in a toast that made Veronica's fingers tighten around her stem. "A brother to my wife, right?" "Right," Jason agreed easily, though something flickered in his eyes. "Veronica and I go way back." "Tell us about that," Nathan suggested, "about growing up together. What was my wife like as a child?" Jason launched into what was clearly a rehearsed story about childhood adventures and shared family holidays. Nathan let him talk, watching Veronica's face grow increasingly pale as Jason's tale contradicted itself in small but significant ways. The street name changed. The timing didn't match. The cast of characters shifted. "Fascinating," Nathan murmured when Jason finished. And this was in Maple Grove, Jason said confidently. Pine Ridge, Veronica corrected quickly. We lived in Pine Ridge, remember? The slip didn't go unnoticed. Daniel looked up from his plate, his forehead creased in confusion. But Mom, you told me last week it was Maple Grove. When you were showing me those old photos? Silence fell over the table like a heavy curtain. Nathan took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. Memory's a funny thing, isn't it? So easy to get details confused when you're trying to keep track of stories. More wine. Veronica stood abruptly, reaching for the bottle with trembling hands. Please, Nathan said softly. Let's all have another glass. We have so much to talk about. Like family, truth, biology. The wine bottle slipped from Veronica's grasp, shattering against the hardwood floor. Red liquid spread like blood across the pale wood, staining everything it touched. Grace, Daniel. Nathan's voice cut through the shocked silence. Please go upstairs to your rooms. But Dad, Daniel started to protest. Now! The word carried the weight of years of accumulated lies. Both children recognized the tone. Not angry, but brooking no argument. They slipped from their chairs, exchanging worried glances as they headed upstairs. Nathan waited until he heard both bedroom doors close before reaching into his briefcase. The sound of the manila envelope hitting the table seemed unnaturally loud in the dining room. Brother and sister, huh? His voice was deadly quiet as he began laying out the photos one by one. Each image captured a moment of betrayal. Veronica and Jason entering the Sunset Valley Motel, their intimate moments in the parking lot, their chance meetings at cafes across town. Interesting definition of family. Veronica's face, already pale from the wine incident, drained of what little color remained. You had me followed? How dare you? How dare I? Nathan's laugh was hollow, echoing off the modern art pieces Veronica had chosen for their walls. That's rich coming from someone who's been lying to me for 8 years. He turned to Jason, who sat frozen in his chair. Or should I say, lying to us both for 8 years? Because I'm guessing you didn't know about Daniel either, did you? Jason's confusion seemed genuine, his brow furrowing as he looked between Nathan and Veronica. What about Daniel? In response, Nathan pulled out the DNA test results, slapping them onto the table with enough force to make the wine glasses rattle. Congratulations. It's a boy. 8 years too late, but hey, better late than never to know you're a father, right? The room exploded into chaos. Jason staggered back from the table, his chair toppling over with a crash. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, shock, dawning realization, and finally, a horrified understanding. That's impossible, he whispered, but his eyes told a different story. They darted to the family photos on the walls, lingering on Daniel's face, seeing perhaps for the first time what Nathan had finally noticed, the undeniable resemblance. Veronica launched into a frenzied denial. You're insane. How could you do this? DNA tests without my knowledge? Hiring private investigators? This is invasion of privacy. This is what happens when you lie to your husband for 8 years. Nathan cut her off. He pulled out more documents, Rachel's investigation results, property records showing Jason's true arrival date in town, statements from former neighbors confirming they'd never heard of him in Veronica's childhood neighborhood. Would you like to try another story? Maybe one that actually matches reality this time. Nathan, please, Veronica's voice cracked. You don't understand. It was complicated. No, it really wasn't. Nathan's calm was terrifying even to himself. You slept with him 8 years ago, got pregnant, decided to pass the child off as mine. Then what? Couldn't stay away? Had to invite your lover back into our lives under the guise of a childhood friend? I never knew, Jason interrupted, his face ashen. Veronica, tell me you didn't. Tell me I haven't had a son for 8 years without knowing. Oh, now you develop a conscience? Nathan rounded on him. What happened to brothers don't sleep with sisters? Or does your moral compass only work when it's convenient? You don't know anything about us? Veronica shouted, tears streaming down her face. About what we had. Nathan seized on the word. Past tense? Or should we talk about the Sunset Valley Motel? Room 114, Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month? Your youth center emergency meetings? Jason sank back into his chair, head in his hands. You told me your marriage was over in all but name, he said to Veronica. You said Nathan couldn't have children, that you'd used a donor, that you were only staying together for the kids. The kids? Nathan's voice rose for the first time. You mean my daughter and the son you fathered? Those kids? A thump from upstairs made them all freeze. Grace's voice drifted down, muffled but audible. Daniel, are you okay? Nathan closed his eyes briefly, forcing his voice back to a controlled level. This ends now. All of it. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he'd had ready. I've already called Michael, he announced, watching Veronica's face crumple at the mention of her brother. Your actual brother? Remember him? He's on his way to pick you up, Veronica. I suggest you pack. You call my brother? Veronica's voice was small, stripped of its earlier defiance. Michael's coming here? Someone in your family should witness what you've done, Nathan replied coldly. Someone besides the children whose lives you've destroyed. The children. Veronica looked toward the stairs, seeming to truly realize for the first time what this meant. Nathan, please, they need their mother. What they need is the truth. What they need is stability. What they need is to not watch their mother sneak around with her lover under the guise of charity work. I'll leave. Jason stood abruptly. I never meant. This wasn't supposed to. Sit down. Nathan's command froze him mid-step. You don't get to walk away from this. Not anymore. Not when there's a child involved. Upstairs, another door opened and closed. The sound of whispered conversation drifted down, followed by quiet crying. Nathan's heart twisted, knowing his children were listening, trying to make sense of their world falling apart. I've contacted a lawyer, he continued, his voice dropping to ensure it wouldn't carry upstairs. You'll be hearing from them tomorrow. Tonight, you're going to go upstairs, pack what you need for a few days, and leave with Michael when he gets here. The children stay with me. You can't just, Veronica began. I can, and I will. Nathan pulled out one final document, a temporary custody order his lawyer had helped him prepare. Unless you'd like to explain to a judge why you think lying about a child's paternity for 8 years makes you the more trustworthy parent. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway silenced any further argument. Headlights swept across the dining room walls, illuminating the scattered evidence of betrayal spread across the table. Photos, DNA results, property records, all the proof of lives built on lies. That'll be Michael, Nathan said quietly. I suggest you start packing, Veronica. We'll sort out proper arrangements through the appropriate channels. As Veronica frantically packed upstairs, the tension in the dining room crystallized into something almost tangible. Jason paced near the window, his usual confident demeanor shattered by the revelations of the evening. Every few steps, he would glance at the DNA results still spread across the table, then at the family photos on the walls, as if seeing them, seeing Daniel for the first time. Nathan, he began, his voice hoarse. I swear I didn't know about Daniel. She told me you couldn't have children, that you'd used a donor. Save it. Nathan cut him off, methodically gathering the scattered evidence into neat piles. The familiar motion of organizing, of putting things in their proper place, helped steady his hands. You knew she was married. You knew she was lying about your relationship. You're not innocent here. Upstairs, drawers slammed and closet doors banged. The sounds of Veronica's hasty packing filtered down, punctuated by what might have been muffled sobs. Through the thin walls of the modern house Nathan had designed with such care, he could hear his children's worried whispers from their rooms. Jason ran a trembling hand through his hair. The youth center, the work we're doing there, it's real, Nathan. Those kids need. Those kids. Nathan's laugh was sharp enough to make Jason flinch. Let's talk about kids, Jason. Let's talk about my son, your son, who's upstairs right now trying to understand why his world is falling apart. Let's talk about how you wormed your way into his life under false pretenses, playing the role of friendly uncle while sleeping with his mother. I didn't. You did. Nathan's voice was deadly quiet now. Every time you came to dinner, every time you helped him with his homework, every time you played the part of the family friend while knowing, or at least suspecting, the truth. You took advantage of my hospitality, my trust, and my family. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway silenced any further protest. Headlights swept across the room as Michael Anderson's police cruiser came to a stop. Nathan watched Jason's face drain of color at the sight of the official vehicle. "That'll be Veronica's actual brother," Nathan said, emphasis bitter on the word actual. "I suggest you make yourself scarce before he comes in. Detective Anderson might have some professional interest in how you run that youth center of yours." Jason backed toward the door, his earlier pleas for understanding forgotten in the face of potential legal scrutiny. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about Daniel." "Yes," Nathan agreed coldly. "You will. And Jason? Don't try to see him before then. Don't call. Don't text. Don't conveniently show up at his school or his activities. Any contact goes through proper legal channels from now on." The front door had barely closed behind Jason when Michael Anderson strode in, his police training evident in his commanding presence. He took in the scene with a detective's practiced eye, the wine stain on the floor, the scattered papers on the table, the broken family portraits on the wall. "Nathan," he nodded grimly. "Where is she?" "Upstairs, packing." Nathan gestured toward the stairs. "She knows you're taking her to your place." Michael's jaw worked as he processed the situation. "I read your text, but—" "Jesus, Nathan. 8 years? And Jason Reynolds." He picked up one of the motel surveillance photos. "I ran a preliminary background check on the drive over. He's done this before. Different cities, different names sometimes, but always the same pattern. Different names? Jason Reynolds is his real one, as far as we can tell. But he's used variations. The youth centers are usually legitimate. That's what makes it so perfect. He builds trust in the community, gets close to vulnerable families." Michael's voice trailed off as footsteps sounded on the stairs. Veronica appeared, dragging 2 hastily packed suitcases. Her makeup was smeared despite obvious attempts to fix it, her designer dress wrinkled from the evening's chaos. She looked small somehow, diminished, nothing like the confident woman who had hosted charity galas and school fundraisers. "The kids," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I at least say goodbye?" Nathan glanced at Michael, who gave a slight nod. "Make it brief," Nathan said. "And Veronica? Don't make promises you can't keep. They've had enough lies." She climbed the stairs again, slower this time. The sound of doors opening echoed through the house, followed by quiet conversations and muffled crying. Nathan closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "I've contacted a lawyer," he said to Michael, needing to focus on practical matters before emotion overwhelmed him. "Patricia Reeves. She's expecting all this tomorrow morning." "Pat's good," Michael nodded. "She handled my partner's custody case last year. She'll make sure everything's done by the book." He hesitated, then added, "Nathan, I had no idea about any of this. The stories Veronica told me about Jason recently, they seemed off, but I never thought—" "None of us did," Nathan replied tiredly. "That's how lies work, isn't it? They seem perfectly reasonable until you start pulling at the threads." Veronica's footsteps sounded on the stairs again. This time when she appeared, her face was a mask of carefully controlled grief. Behind her, Nathan could hear Daniel and Grace in their rooms, the quiet sounds of confusion and distress that no child should have to experience. "I've contacted a lawyer," Nathan informed her as she reached for her suitcases. "Expect to hear from them tomorrow." He paused, making sure she met his eyes. "And Veronica? The kids stay here tonight. We'll sort out arrangements through proper channels." Michael stepped forward, taking the suitcases from his sister's trembling hands. "My spare room's ready," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." As they moved toward the door, Veronica turned one last time. "Nathan, please, the children. We'll have both parents in their lives," Nathan finished firmly. "But on legal, structured terms. No more lies, Veronica. No more manipulation." The door closed behind them with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the empty house. Through the window, Nathan watched Michael load the suitcases into his cruiser, saw Veronica's shoulders shake as she climbed into the passenger seat. The headlights swept across the house one final time as they pulled away, leaving Nathan alone in the wreckage of his marriage. Upstairs, Grace's voice called out tremulously, "Daddy?" Nathan took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. His children needed him now more than ever. The legal battles, the custody arrangements, the painful conversations, all of that could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was about holding what remained of his family together. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back, already climbing the stairs. Each step felt heavy with the responsibility of rebuilding his children's shattered world. But he would do it, one step at a time, one day at a time. He would help them heal. Behind him, the dining room remained a tableau of destruction. Wine-stained floor, scattered evidence, empty chairs around a half-finished meal. Tomorrow, he would clean it up. Tomorrow, he would start the process of legally dismantling his marriage. Tomorrow, he would face the reality of co-parenting with the woman who had betrayed him and the man who had fathered his son. But tonight, he had two scared children who needed their father. And that at least was a role he knew how to play. One built not on DNA or legal documents, but on love, trust, and the daily choice to be there for the people who needed him most. Patricia Reeves's office exuded an aura of practiced calm, from the muted earth tones of the walls to the soft classical music playing in the background. Nathan sat across from her mahogany desk, watching as she methodically reviewed the evidence he and Rachel had collected. Each document was placed in precise order: surveillance photos, DNA results, property records, text message logs, building a fortress of truth around the ruins of his marriage. "This is comprehensive," Patricia said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun that matched her reputation as one of the city's most formidable family law attorneys. Rachel Martinez's work is excellent as always. The documentation of Veronica's deception is particularly damning. What about the children? Nathan's voice cracked slightly. It had been 2 weeks since the confrontation. 2 weeks of careful dancing around truths too heavy for young hearts to bear. How do we handle telling them? Patricia's expression softened. "I've arranged for Dr. Sarah Chun to join us. She specializes in helping children through situations like this." She checked her tablet. "She can meet with all of you tomorrow at 10. As if summoned by the conversation, a gentle knock interrupted them. Dr. Chun entered, her warm smile and casual cardigan offering a stark contrast to Patricia's power suit. "I hope I'm not too early. I wanted to review the situation before meeting the children." "Perfect timing." Patricia gestured to an empty chair. "Nathan, Dr. Chun has extensive experience in helping families navigate complex truths. She'll guide you through telling Daniel and Grace about the situation in an age-appropriate way." Dr. Chun opened her notebook, her pen poised. "Tell me about your children, Mr. Cooper. What are their personalities like? How do they handle difficult emotions?" Nathan closed his eyes briefly, picturing his children's faces. "Grace is 8. She's sensitive, intuitive. She picks up on everything, even things we try to hide from her. These past 2 weeks, she's been extra clingy, like she can sense something's wrong, but doesn't know what. And Daniel? 10. He's the practical one. Always wants to understand how things work, why things happen." Nathan's voice caught. "He's been asking about Jason. They were close." "Jason encouraged his interest in architecture, used to take him to construction sites." Dr. Chin nodded, making notes. "That relationship adds another layer of complexity. Finding out about his biological father will be particularly challenging given their existing bond." She looked up, her dark eyes kind but direct. "How are you handling that aspect?" Nathan struggled to find words. "He's my son. DNA doesn't change that. I've been his father for 10 years. Taught him to ride a bike, helped with homework, held him through nightmares." "That's exactly what we'll emphasize," Dr. Chin said firmly. "Family is about more than biology. It's about love, commitment, daily choices. We'll help Daniel understand that having 2 fathers, one who raised him and one who contributed DNA, doesn't diminish either relationship." Patricia shuffled some papers. "Legally, we're on solid ground. Nathan's name is on the birth certificate. He's been the primary father figure throughout Daniel's life, and there's documented evidence of Veronica's deception. Jason's sudden claim to paternity won't override 10 years of established parenthood. But he should know the truth," Nathan insisted. "Both children should. No more lies." Dr. Chin nodded approvingly. Honesty, delivered with age-appropriate sensitivity, is crucial. I suggest we meet with them together tomorrow. You'll be the primary voice, Mr. Cooper, with me there to guide the conversation and help process their reactions. The meeting continued, strategies discussed, and plans made. By the time Nathan left the office, his briefcase was heavy with resources. Children's books about changing families, workbooks for processing difficult emotions, referrals to family therapists specializing in parental deception. The drive home felt longer than usual. Nathan found himself rehearsing words, trying to find the right combination to minimize the pain he was about to cause his children. How do you tell a 10-year-old boy that his uncle is actually his biological father? How do you explain to an 8-year-old girl why her mother lied? Mrs. Martinez, their elderly neighbor who'd been watching the children, met him at the door. They're doing their homework, she said softly. Daniel's been very quiet today. Grace asked 3 times when you'd be home. Nathan found them in the kitchen. Textbooks spread across the table, he'd cleared of wine stains and scattered evidence just 2 weeks ago. Grace launched herself at him immediately, wrapping her arms around his waist. Daniel looked up from his math homework, his smile so achingly similar to Jason's that Nathan's heart clenched. How about pizza for dinner? Nathan suggested, mustering cheerfulness he didn't feel. And I'd like to talk to you both about something important tomorrow. We're going to meet someone who helps families talk about difficult things. Is it about Mom? Grace asked, her voice small. Is she coming home? Daniel set down his pencil, suddenly looking older than his 10 years. It's about Jason too, isn't it? And why he hasn't been around. Nathan sat down heavily at the table, pulling Grace onto his lap while reaching for Daniel's hand. Yes, sweetheart. It's about all of that. And I promise. He met both their eyes, putting every ounce of love he felt into his gaze. I promise to tell you the whole truth. No more secrets in this family. As they ate pizza and tried to maintain normal dinner conversation, Nathan watched his children carefully. Grace, picking olives off her slice with focused determination. Daniel, unusually quiet but still offering to help clean up. They were so resilient, his children. But tomorrow would test that resilience in ways they couldn't imagine. Later, after tucking them into bed with extra long hugs and one more story than usual, Nathan sat in his home office reviewing Dr. Chin's materials. A photo on his desk caught his eye, Daniel's last birthday, Nathan teaching him how to use a professional drafting tool. The joy on both their faces was real, unposed, untainted by knowledge of DNA results or hidden truths. You're still my son, Nathan whispered to the photograph. Nothing changes that. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Everything's set for tomorrow. 10 a.m. Dr. Chun will meet you at the office. Bring comfort objects for the kids if they have them. Nathan replied with a simple thank you, then opened his journal, a habit Dr. Chun had recommended for processing his own emotions during this process. Tomorrow would change everything for his children. But tonight, he needed to find the words to help them understand that while truth could hurt, it was always better than lies. That family wasn't about blood or biology, but about love and choice and showing up every day. He began to write, Dear Daniel and Grace. The courthouse loomed before them. Nathan adjusted his tie, feeling the weight of Rachel's final report in his briefcase. Over the past month, her investigation had uncovered patterns that turned his personal tragedy into something far more sinister. Patricia Reeves strode down the courthouse steps to meet them, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. Rachel's inside, she said without preamble. She's prepared to testify about Jason's history in other cities. Michael's here too. He's bringing evidence from the police investigation into the youth center's finances. Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. The weeks since telling the children the truth had been a blur of legal depositions, therapy sessions, and careful custody negotiations. Daniel had been remarkably steady through it all, though Nathan often heard him crying at night. Grace had become their family's emotional barometer, instinctively offering hugs when the tension grew too thick. Inside the courtroom, Veronica sat with her lawyer, her designer outfit and perfect makeup a stark contrast to her obvious exhaustion. She didn't look up when Nathan entered, but her hands tightened on the legal pad before her. All rise, The bailiff called as Judge Margaret Chun entered. No relation to Dr. Chun, though they shared the same steady, penetrating gaze. The proceedings began with the clinical efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Patricia presented their evidence methodically. The DNA results, the surveillance photos, the documented pattern of lies. But it was Rachel's testimony that transformed the atmosphere in the courtroom. My investigation revealed that Mr. Reynolds has operated youth centers in 4 other cities under slightly varying names, Rachel stated, her professional demeanor unwavering. In each location, he developed inappropriate relationships with married women, often those involved in volunteering or fundraising. Veronica's sharp intake of breath echoed in the quiet courtroom. Nathan watched her face as Rachel continued, wondering if she'd known about Jason's past. Furthermore, Rachel consulted her notes. Financial records show irregular transfers from the youth center accounts to personal accounts controlled by Mr. Reynolds. The pattern suggests... Objection. Veronica's lawyer stood. This is a divorce proceeding, not a criminal investigation. The evidence speaks to character and fitness for custody, Patricia countered smoothly. Mr. Reynolds has been spending significant time with the minor children under false pretenses. Overruled. Judge Chen's voice cracked like a whip. Continue, Ms. Martinez. As Rachel detailed Jason's history of manipulation and financial impropriety, Nathan watched the color drain from Veronica's face. When Michael took the stand next, carrying a thick folder of police reports, she seemed to physically shrink in her chair. As a detective in the neighboring jurisdiction, Michael's testimony was professional. Despite the personal cost, I've uncovered evidence suggesting systematic exploitation of vulnerable families through the youth center program. While the investigation is ongoing, preliminary findings indicate. Your Honor, Veronica's voice cut through the courtroom. I'd like to speak. Judge Chun peered over her glasses. Ms. Cooper, you're represented by counsel. Any statements should. I need to tell the truth. Veronica stood, ignoring her lawyer's attempt to pull her back. All of it. About Jason, about Daniel, about everything. For the next hour, Veronica's carefully constructed walls crumbled. She detailed her first meeting with Jason 8 years ago. His subtle manipulation, the way he convinced her their connection, was special, different from his other relationships. She admitted to knowing about some of his past, but believing she was different, that he'd changed. The lie about Daniel. Her voice cracked. It started because I was scared. Nathan and I had been trying for a baby, and when I found out I was pregnant, I told myself it was better for everyone if no one knew the truth. Then Jason came back, and everything spiraled. Nathan listened, his heart a complex tangle of anger, pity, and grief. He thought of Daniel at home, probably working on the architectural sketches that had become his way of processing emotion. Of Grace, who'd taken to carrying her mother's old scarf around like a security blanket. The court has heard enough. Judge Chen's voice cut through Nathan's thoughts. Given the evidence presented, including Ms. Cooper's testimony, I'm prepared to rule on the custody arrangement. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Nathan was awarded primary custody of both children. Veronica would have supervised visitation, contingent upon completion of therapy and counseling. Jason would be barred from contact with the children pending the outcome of the criminal investigation into the youth center. Furthermore, Judge Chen added, fixing Veronica with a stern gaze, any future attempts to alienate the children from either parent will result in immediate modification of these terms. Mr. Cooper has demonstrated remarkable restraint and concern for his children's well-being throughout this process. I expect similar maturity from you, Ms. Cooper. Outside the courtroom, Michael caught up with Nathan. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. Jason's gone. Left town the night after Rachel testified to the grand jury. We're tracking him, but... Nathan nodded, unsurprised. The children, protected by the court order, Patricia interjected, joining them. And I've already filed restraining orders based on the new evidence. They're safe, Nathan. The ride home was silent, Nathan's mind racing with everything that had happened. The truth about Jason had been even worse than he'd imagined, but somehow, having it all in the open felt like lancing a poisoned wound. Painful, but necessary for healing. He found Grace and Daniel in the backyard with Dr. Chun, who'd been conducting their therapy sessions at home to maintain a sense of security. They were working on what she called a feelings garden, painting rocks with emotions and planting them among real flowers. Dad! Grace held up a purple rock. This one says brave, because that's what Dr. Sarah says we all are. Daniel looked up from his own rock, his face serious. How did it go? Nathan sat down in the grass beside them, picking up a blank rock and a paintbrush. The truth won, he said simply. And we're going to be okay. Dr. Chin nodded approvingly at his response. They'd practiced how to discuss the court proceedings with the children, honest but age-appropriate, focusing on safety and stability rather than blame. As they painted rocks together in the warm afternoon sun, Nathan felt something shift inside him. The worst was over. The lies had been exposed, justice had been served, and now they could begin to heal. A year had passed since the courthouse steps, marking the seasons with small victories and quiet healing. Nathan stood at his backyard grill, watching Daniel and Grace splash in the pool, their laughter a testament to children's resilience. The summer air was thick with the scent of grilling burgers and the promise of better days. Need any help with those burgers? Dominic called from the patio, where he was setting up paper plates and plastic cups. Though I should warn you, my culinary skills haven't improved since college. I think we'd all prefer if you stuck to architecture, Nathan chuckled, flipping a burger with practiced ease. The easy banter with his old friend felt normal, grounding, a reminder that some relationships had grown stronger through the crisis. Rachel appeared from inside the house, carrying a bowl of salad. The past year had changed their professional relationship into something warmer, more personal. Nathan noticed the way Dominic's eyes followed her movement, the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth. Grace! Rachel called out. Show me that swimming technique we practiced last week. The little girl beamed, proud to show off her improved freestyle. She'd been taking swimming lessons with Rachel every Saturday morning, one of many new routines that had helped stitch their fractured family back together. Watch this dive, Dad. Daniel stood at the pool's edge, waiting for Nathan's attention. At 11 now, he'd grown taller, more confident. The monthly therapy sessions with Dr. Chun had helped him process the complex truths about his biology without losing his sense of security in Nathan's love. I'm watching, son, Nathan called back, his heart full at the simple exchange. These moments, the ordinary, everyday celebrations of family, meant everything now. Michael emerged from the house, carrying more supplies. He'd become a constant presence in their lives, the uncle the children needed, and the friend Nathan relied on. Even his relationship with Veronica had begun to heal, slowly, through shared concern for the children's welfare. Veronica called, Michael said quietly, joining Nathan at the grill. She's doing well in her therapy. The counselor thinks she might be ready for unsupervised visits soon. Nathan nodded, considering. The past year had seen Veronica working hard to rebuild trust with the children, with her brother, with herself. The supervised visits had started awkwardly, but gradually evolved into meaningful connections, especially as she learned to be honest about her mistakes and genuine in her attempts to make amends. What do you think? Nathan asked, respecting Michael's insight, both as an uncle and a detective. She's changed, Michael replied thoughtfully. The therapy's helping her understand why she made those choices with Jason. She's not the same person who lived in denial for 8 years. The mention of Jason's name no longer carried the same sting. He disappeared after the court proceedings, though Michael's department occasionally tracked his movements to new cities, new youth centers. The restraining orders remained in place, a legal shield protecting their family from further manipulation. Uncle Mike, Grace called from the pool. Come in. You promised to teach me how to do handstands underwater. Michael grinned, already pulling off his t-shirt. Duty calls. Don't burn those burgers, Nathan. Rachel wandered over, stealing a chip from the open bag near the grill. It's good to see them so happy, she observed, watching the children play with their uncle. Dr. Chin says their progress has been remarkable. They're stronger than I ever imagined, Nathan agreed. We all are. Dominic joined them, casually slipping his hand into Rachel's. Their relationship had bloomed slowly over the past year, nurtured by shared concern for Nathan's family and a deepening connection neither had expected. Speaking of strength, Dominic said, have you seen Daniel's latest architectural drawings? He's got real talent. The firm's summer youth program would be perfect for him. Nathan smiled, remembering the detailed sketches Daniel had shown him that morning. A house design that incorporated elements of safety and openness, unconsciously reflecting his journey through therapy. He's processing everything through his art. Dr. Chun says it's a healthy outlet. The afternoon unfolded in a comfortable rhythm of swimming, eating, and easy conversation. Even the arrival of Veronica's supervised visit felt natural, integrated into their new normal. She joined them with less awkwardness than in the early days, accepting a burger and sitting with Grace to hear about her latest art project. As the sun began to set, Nathan found himself taking mental snapshots of the moment. Daniel explaining his latest design idea to Dominic. Grace showing Veronica her feelings garden, now flourishing with both real flowers and painted rocks. Michael and Rachel discussing plans for next weekend's swimming lessons. His family, changed but unbroken, redefined but stronger. Dad! Daniel climbed out of the pool, shaking water everywhere. Watch this dive. Nathan set down his spatula, giving his son his full attention. This was what mattered, being present, being consistent, being real. I'm watching, son, he called back. I'm always watching. The dive was perfect, creating minimal splash. Daniel surfaced with a triumphant grin that was purely his own. Not Nathan's, not Jason's, just Daniel's. In that moment, Nathan felt the truth of what Dr. Chin had been teaching them all year. Family wasn't about biology or false claims of brotherhood. It was about choices, commitment, and showing up every day for the people who mattered. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Nathan sat in his backyard alone. The pool lights cast blue ripples across the patio, and the night air still held traces of summer warmth. He pulled out his journal, a habit he'd maintained since those first difficult days, and began to write. Today was a good day, he wrote. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. We're building something authentic from the ashes of betrayal. The children are healing. Veronica is trying. Michael is the brother I never had. Dominic and Rachel found love in the midst of chaos. And me? I'm learning that sometimes the family you choose, the family you fight for, is stronger than the family you're born into. A soft noise made him look up. Daniel stood in the doorway, pajama-clad and serious. Can't sleep? Nathan asked, making room on the patio chair. Daniel settled beside him, fitting perfectly in the space under Nathan's arm. I was thinking about family, he said quietly. About how it's not just about DNA. No, Nathan agreed, holding his son close. It's about love, about showing up, about choosing each other every day. They sat together under the stars, father and son. Their bond forged not by biology, but by a decade of love, strengthened by truth, and tested by fire. The pool water lapped gently against the sides, a peaceful rhythm that spoke of continuity and calm after the storm. I love you, Dad, Daniel murmured, half asleep. I love you too, son, Nathan replied, his heart full. Always have, always will. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, bearing witness to this moment of quiet triumph. A family rebuilt, stronger at the broken places, held together not by lies but by love, choice, and the daily commitment to show up for each other, no matter what. Epilogue. 5 years later. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the drafting table where Daniel Cooper, now 16, hunched over his latest architectural design. His fingers moved with confident precision, adjusting measurements on what would become his submission for a prestigious youth architecture competition. The home office he shared with his father had become a sanctuary of creativity, its walls lined with their joint projects and awards. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand, watching his son work. These quiet morning moments still carried echoes of past pain, but they'd been transformed into something precious. Daniel had grown into a thoughtful young man, his talent for architecture flourishing under Nathan's guidance. The DNA results that had once threatened to tear them apart had become nothing more than a footnote in their story. You're hovering, Dad, Daniel said without looking up, a smile in his voice. The competition deadline isn't until next week. Just admiring your work, Nathan replied, entering the room. The sustainable housing concept is innovative. The judges will love it. Daniel sat back, running a hand through his dark hair. A gesture so reminiscent of Jason that it still occasionally caught Nathan off guard. It's inspired by Dr. Chen's office, actually. Remember how she always said healing spaces need both security and openness? I wanted to design something that could help other families. You know, like us. The mention of Dr. Chen brought a fond smile to Nathan's face. Though their regular therapy sessions had ended years ago, she remained a family friend, often attending their celebrations and continuing to marvel at how her former patients had thrived. Grace's voice echoed up the stairs, interrupting their moment. "Dad, Daniel, Mom's here." The relationship with Veronica had evolved in ways none of them had expected. After 2 years of supervised visits and intensive therapy, she'd earned back the right to unsupervised time with her children. More surprisingly, she'd found her calling as a counselor for other women recovering from manipulative relationships. Her own experience had transformed into a tool for helping others heal. Nathan and Daniel headed downstairs to find Veronica in the kitchen with Grace, who at 13 had developed their mother's auburn hair but Nathan's steady temperament. The scene was comfortable now, lacking the tension that had once characterized every interaction. The youth center called, Veronica said, accepting the coffee Nathan offered, a small gesture that spoke volumes about their reconstructed relationship. "They want me to speak at next month's conference about recognizing manipulation and rebuilding trust." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The same youth center where everything had unraveled had been restructured after Jason's departure, becoming a legitimate force for community good. Veronica's involvement there was part of her own redemption story. "That's great, Mom," Grace said, genuine pride in her voice. She'd struggled the most with trust issues after the divorce, but therapy and time had helped her understand that people could make terrible mistakes and still find their way back to integrity. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. After helping bring Jason to justice, Michael had been promoted to lead detective, his work on the case revealing similar schemes in other cities. His message today was triumphant. Final conviction secured. 8 years total. He won't hurt any more families. The news about Jason's sentencing had been a long time coming. After fleeing town, he'd attempted to establish new youth centers in other cities, but Michael's investigation had created a domino effect. Former victims came forward, financial crimes were uncovered, and eventually, justice caught up with him. The 8-year sentence felt poetically appropriate, matching the years he'd hidden the truth about Daniel. "Uncle Mike's coming to the barbecue tomorrow, right?" Daniel asked, reading the text over Nathan's shoulder. While he'd chosen not to have any contact with Jason, his relationship with Michael had deepened into a true uncle-nephew bond. "Wouldn't miss it," Nathan confirmed. Rachel and Dominic too, with the twins. The mention of the twins made everyone smile. Rachel and Dominic's unexpected romance had blossomed into marriage 3 years ago, and their year-old twins had become the joy of their extended family circle. Rachel had expanded her private investigation firm, specializing in helping families affected by similar situations to theirs. Dominic had become a partner in Nathan's architectural firm, their friendship stronger for having weathered the storm together. The doorbell rang, and Grace rushed to answer it. "Aunt Patricia!" Patricia Reeves, who'd long since shifted from their lawyer to family friend, entered carrying what was obviously a wrapped canvas. "A little early for Daniel's graduation, I know," she said, her formerly severe bun now softened into an elegant silver sweep. "But I couldn't wait." The unwrapped gift revealed an artistically rendered family tree, but not one showing biological connections. Instead, it illustrated the bonds they'd chosen and nurtured. Nathan and his children at the center, surrounded by Michael, Rachel, Dominic, Dr. Chun, Patricia herself, and yes, even Veronica. Each connection marked not with traditional family labels, but with words like strength, support, growth, and forgiveness. "It's perfect," Nathan said softly, watching his children trace the connections with gentle fingers. Later that evening, after Veronica had left for her therapy group and Grace had gone to soccer practice, Nathan found Daniel in the backyard by the pool. The same pool where, years ago, they'd begun to rebuild their shattered world. "Do you ever think about him?" Nathan asked quietly, knowing no other context was needed. Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching the water reflect the setting sun. Sometimes, he admitted, not as my father. That's you, always will be. But I think about choices, about how the truths we hide can hurt more than the truths we face. Nathan nodded, hearing echoes of Dr. Chin's wisdom in his son's words. Your competition design, it's about more than just sustainable housing, isn't it? It's about creating spaces where families can heal, Daniel said, where truth and forgiveness can coexist, where mistakes don't have to define us. The next day's barbecue painted a vivid picture of how far they'd come. Michael arrived early, helping Nathan with the grill while sharing updates about his latest cases. Rachel and Dominic juggled the twins, their happiness evident in every gesture. Dr. Chin engaged Grace in a deep discussion about her plans to start a peer support group at school. Patricia and Veronica discussed the upcoming conference. Their former lawyer-client relationship transformed into genuine friendship. As Nathan watched his expanded family, some bound by blood, others by choice, all bound by love and shared history, he remembered the words he'd written in his journal years ago. Sometimes the family you choose, the family you fight for, is stronger than the family you're born into. Daniel emerged from the house, carrying his competition designs, eager to share them with Dominic. Grace demonstrated her latest soccer moves for Michael. The twins toddled between adults who all reached instinctively to steady their steps. Even Veronica had found her place in this reconstructed family, her past mistakes not forgotten but forgiven, her presence a testament to the possibility of redemption. The afternoon sun glinted off the pool water, creating patterns that danced across their faces. Nathan thought about consequences, how Veronica's affair had shattered their original family but led to this larger, stronger one. How Jason's deception had ultimately failed to destroy what it had meant to exploit. How truth, even painful truth, had set them all free to build something authentic. "Dad!" Daniel called from the pool's edge, 16 years old, but for a moment sounding just like the child he'd been when their world first cracked. "Watch this dive." Nathan smiled, remembering all the dives he'd watched over the years, each one marking a step in their journey from broken to whole. "I'm watching, son," he called back, his voice carrying years of love, commitment, and chosen family. "I'm always watching." The splash echoed across the yard, ripples spreading outward like the effects of a single choice made years ago. But unlike those first devastating ripples of betrayal, these spoke of renewal, of family redefined, of love that transcends biology and boundaries. In the end, their story wasn't just about surviving betrayal. It was about the family they'd chosen to become, the truth they'd chosen to face, and the love they chose every day to nurture and protect. The consequences of Veronica's affair and Jason's deception had changed them all, but not in the ways either had intended. Instead of destroying a family, their actions had ultimately led to the creation of a stronger one built not on lies or obligations, but on choice, truth, and the daily decision to show up for each other, no matter what. As the sun set on another family gathering, Nathan looked around at their expanded circle. The children who had grown stronger through adversity, the friends who had become family, the wounds that had healed into wisdom. He thought about consequences, about choices, about the incredible resilience of the human heart. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that they had built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. A family bounded not by blood or biology, but by love, truth, and the courage to choose each other every single day. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.